Okay, welcome to another video. In this video, I would like to go into a subject that I've been pondering on the subject for a long time, and that is how it is possible that sometimes we're having a conversation with even people that seem to care for us, family, friends, or someone who you think would be able to understand it. We think sometimes they're intelligent enough to follow a certain idea about something, whether it's a physical or mental or spiritual idea, and somehow they don't seem to get it. It could be around Corona, what they did with the shots and everything, and you're trying to tell them like you're serious about this, you really think this is a good idea, you really believe that masks and stuff is going to stop, and then somehow they don't get it, no matter what angle you come from, no matter what you're describing, no matter how much evidence you bring, no matter how many ways you describe what you're describing to them, they just don't seem to get it. And you're like, I've been wondering about that. And in this video, I'm going to go into a structure that maybe might clarify some of it. And it has to do, first of all, with the layers of physicality, right, of body, then of mind, psyche, and then of spiritual ideas. And the idea is that, first of all, physical things, they're right there. Right, so you think if you're looking at both of you standing in the same spot right next to each other and you're looking at a beach, you would agree it's a beach. And these kinds of ideas in the physical should be pretty clear. And that is mostly the case, but even then the conditioning can be different. So let's say this guy is describing and he sees a dog and it's a pit bull and he says, wow, look at that beautiful pit bull, it's really, muscular and healthy and strong and whatever. And this person might actually have different conditioning. So he might have actually been bitten by a dog when he was young and heard about pit bulls and think, well, I've been bitten and I know pit bulls are pretty bad. I mean, I don't see a beautiful dog. He sees a threat. He sees an ugly, aggressive, dangerous object, a thing, an animal that might bite him. So even when you're looking at physical ideas, they're not necessarily going to agree on the same thing. But with the physical, generally speaking, if you're just objectively describing something, it would be pretty clear that you're looking at the same thing. And mistakes and misunderstandings and disagreements is fairly hard if people are authentically wanting to understand the other person's, what the other person's pointing at, right? However, when we go from the physical to the psyche, it becomes a whole different ballgame, because in the psyche, it becomes more complicated, because the idea that you're describing in the psyche is really an idea. It's not physical. So, for example, if I say the red sports car, then somebody might see a Ferrari or a Porsche, But if I would say just the red car, somebody might even see a Fiat or something, or some cheap car or something like that, that somehow was important to him because that's what he owned for the first 10 years of its life or someone, right? So when I point at something, I would describe something in the psyche, which is in the mental space, right? Which is in the space that is the imaginary part, what we call the mind or the psyche. So when I say the red sports car was driving really fast and flew around the corner, slipped and tumbled over into a ditch. Well, it depends where you grew up. You might see a different car, you might see different type of roads, you might see different trees around the roads, you might see a different ditch, maybe it's full of grass, but maybe you grew up in a drier part of a country where there was no grass, so you see dusty sand or cacti or whatever, right? So here it already starts getting a lot more complicated, where your ideas, when you're describing to the other person, they're not looking at the same structure because they have different conditioning. And this is where misunderstandings start occurring. And the more stubborn they are about certain things, the harder it is to imagine. The less imagination they have, they might not be able to move into follow your kind of construction within that psychic space, because really you're like building an idea. It's almost a magical, what they call spelling, right? We're spelling this, the red car was driving fast and spun out when it came through a sharp corner, and then flew over and whatever, right? You start describing, it really becomes this kind of magical journey you take people on in the mind space. So here you already start seeing that misunderstanding becomes more like what we see in the Tower of Babel, right? The Babylonic type of structure where people disagree with each other. And these lines, which I call veils, you could see that these are ideas or veils, or you could call them like curtains, right? A veil that blocks somebody from seeing something else. These lines could actually be made into intermittent, so there'd be like little dots and lines and longer and shorter pieces with more holes between them and openings. So technically, everybody's conditioned so differently that when somebody's describing a certain idea, even though you're pointing in a specific direction, like this guy's specifically talking about this circle here, this idea here, the other person might only get to there as close as he can get, and it's already not the same idea. So they already have a completely different, or slightly different at least, idea of what they're talking about. And that's why people start disagreeing. Now, when it gets really complicated is when you start talking about even more complicated ideas that are not even describing something physical like a red car spinning out, where you start talking about archetypes and about principles and about spiritual ideas that don't even have shape to them, don't have a specific shape or color or any form to them. These are real ideas, and this is where a lot of people start having a lot of trouble. And you realize sometimes that you're all alone, right? So in this model here, I put them together, all three of them, and you can see here that the physical is the first layer. So basically, at that point, both of these people are not looking anymore to something physical, like a beach or a red sports car right there in front of both of them when they're in the same place. So they're not looking at physical. They're actually kind of staring into their psychic space. What's happening right there might only be the other person's face that they're talking to in the room or wherever they're at. That kind of fades away. They're looking past it. And now they're looking into this psychic space. Or when you go to a spiritual idea, they're looking into a much more ethereal or less tangible, more fine idea that is a spiritual idea. And this is where things get really complicated. Because in most cases, if this person is talking about something that is actually a archetypal principle, and this person has never even studied that or never read books on it, they can't even look past the physical. And this is what I'm running into in my life most of the cases whenever I meet people, that the conversations rarely go past these two layers. So most people speak about, let's say, what's going on now. They don't even talk a lot about what's going on now. Generally, people don't talk a lot about what's going on here. They always talk about where they've been, where they're going, what happened to this person, what they said, what they shouldn't have said, and then the whole thing takes place in this kind of mental space, and they kind of zone out. They even zone out on everything is so beautiful around. Like they could be sitting right in the middle of a forest, and they're all talking about, yeah, but she said to me this, and I said to her, you shouldn't do that, and that kind of conversation. If you go to any any restaurant in the world, pretty much every table, if you listen in, they're talking about stuff that's not here, because they love the mental space. Like that's the other model I have in where you see the bulging mind from the past and the future, and they're living in this psychic space, mental space, and they're not talking even about the beauty of life right now. So the now has become unimportant. They're kind of staring at each other at the dining table and talking about something in here, which is the model we have over here, where they're talking about different ideas and hoping that the other person is on the same page. And they try to find unity in the conversation. They're sharing, and he's sharing, and they're having this back and forth kind of sharing about certain ideas. But they're hoping that they're coming as close to each other, because that creates resonance, and then they feel, rapport with each other. But when somebody's talking about a spiritual idea, and the other person doesn't even concern themselves, and they're not even ever reading on or studying or anything and understanding about that, when this person starts describing a spiritual idea, the other can't even see past its own conceptions. So these are the conditioned conceptions within the psyche. So to them, spirit isn't actually over there, because to them the spiritual world doesn't even exist in most cases. But instead, they're looking at a conception of that comes closest to what this person is trying to describe, which is, if this person is religious, they will disagree with meditation or what yoga really is, and all these ideas he might be describing. The person can't follow him. The only thing they come to is their conditioning from their Christian background, or their this background, or their whatever religion background they have. Maybe they've been raised Buddhist or this or that, and they can't see past it. And that's why this person who's trying to describe this is thinking, I'm describing it in 100,000 ways. I can demonstrate it. I can show you proof that the system works like that. Yet the other person simply doesn't seem to get it. Sometimes they stare at you like you're talking, another language, And that's because they can't reach through these layers, which is really they function as veils, as nets. It's like the ring pass knot or the guardian of the threshold. This person is actually not even allowed access to this kind of idea, because he hasn't done the work, hasn't gone within to dissolve the veils that block his intelligence from looking behind. You have to kind of see through the illusionary structures that are in front that seem solid and seem to block the more ethereal or more energetic or more fine, the subtle layers behind it. So that person will just be seeing its own ideas or whatever has been fed by their religious or their conditioning of the family, the conditioning of the schooling, the conditioning of the society, and of course what we have now a lot is the whole media, right? Which is trying to shape the narrative so that everybody agrees with them. So these people, a lot of people, if they watch the news and stuff, I agree that this guy is the bad guy and that's the good guy and he should be arrested, but he shouldn't, and you should take the vaccine and it's good because it's going to stop this, and when this guy is trying to speak about a different idea, even an idea that's more in here, they disagree, right? And then you wonder, well, but I try to prove this stuff to you by so much evidence, and they can't see it because they are unwilling and unable to see past those veils, right? So in this next model here, you can see that in this case, where we're talking about here, it's also pretty clear that we have a situation where it comes to the physical. Let me just take this one a little bigger. It's a bigger model here. Yeah, that should be enough, I think. So if you look at this model here, you'll see that there's obviously plenty of people that are capable of agreeing to some degree on a physical level, that is a red sports car. Somebody might not disagree with you because there's a lot of people that can see that. It's physical, it's in front of them, and it's hard to have an argument, but they will tell you which is a better car, which is a worse car, that you shouldn't buy that it's shit, and that this is the only car that really matters. So they do have discussions there, don't make no mistake. But there's fewer people that can see into psychic ideas, which means mental ideas. For example, Jordan Peterson, when he speaks about certain ideas, he's obviously capable of describing them really well. And when he has a discussion with people about them, he can point and prove and redirect and show fallacies in thought and then bring people back to the idea that is much clearer within that psychic idea. And there's even fewer people that can go all the way into a psychic idea. It's a spiritual idea, right? So it's a spirit idea, an idea of higher, lofty, ethereal, finite, much more fine, I mean not finite, but fine essence. And that's where you really come to stand alone in life. And this is why people who gravitated towards seeing further, who have seen more than other people have into layers, not because they're better, but because they've done certain works that they can see through layers and veils that stop other people from seeing. So when this guy tried to describe to these people here what's actually going on in, let's say, the mind space, the psyche, or in spiritual ideas, most of these people will zone out, or they call them crazy, they call them a conspiracy theorist, they call you, floaty, airy, drifty, whatever. This guy's off in another world, because the majority, the masses, the populace, will always be confined within a very limited vision of both physicality, mentality, and spirituality. And so as you grow, you eventually and gradually turn into more of a recluse, into a loner, because there's just not a lot of people to have conversations with. And this is one of the things that becomes so hard over time, because if you end up in a position where you are quite alone in this, a lot of people end up feeling frustrated because people try to invite you to parties and they want you to come to family dinners or whatever, and then you're not even involved in that. They want to talk about all the superficial stuff, and you want to go into some deeper material, and they just don't understand why you keep talking about these things that they don't understand, and they don't understand why you're not interested in what Lucy in the barbershop is doing, and what the new shop that opened over there, or the new car that they bought. At some point, most people that are a little bit more busy with higher ideas, with ideas that go into more profound levels of being, they're like, okay, well, 15 minutes of chit chat is pretty much all I can handle. And then afterwards, I'd like to go into another subject. And you find that these people just they can't. They're not even to blame, but every time you're pointing towards something, they're just getting blocked over here, over here, over here, over here. And even if they could talk about spiritual ideas, they might disagree with you at some point, because even there they have a conception of the spiritual idea that's actually being held in the psyche, in the mind, and it's not the actual direct experience of being. So someone who has gone into the state of being, who's gone into this silent state where they weren't focused on the physical, they're not talking about ideas, concepts, right, in the mind, but they're actually directly experiencing fullness of being. If you speak to somebody like that, it's very likely they're going to be like, okay, you might use the word being. I call it maybe spirit or soul or God or whatever they call it. They would agree, okay, I know what you're describing, they would say. I know what you're talking about. And you can follow each other. And that's just becomes rare and rare and rarer as you progress or see through the veils that block others from seeing those deeper principles. So I hope that helps. This idea maybe clarifies a little bit how people see different things, and why in many cases a lot of people are unable to kind of be in the social setting anymore after a while, because if you're not just talking about physical ideas, but you're also talking about deeper principle ideas behind it in the psyche, let alone if you're talking about spiritual ideas, then it just becomes harder and harder to find people to be able to follow you and participate in the conversation, so that the conversation actually is interesting. And so these people end up usually becoming quite alone, and they wonder why the hell it is that even if the people love them, the parents or the family or the friends or whoever like them or love them or care for them, and even try to understand, that they somehow just can't take it past that. And for the person like that, it becomes a normal thing to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to come to your party, I'm not going to come to your wedding, or I'm not coming to your wherever you're going, because I can't be around you that long, considering that I can't be busy with it. This, like, for this person, speaking only about physical or very simplistic psychic ideas, mental ideas, it's just soul deadening, because they're kind of reflecting off of this deeper level in the back here, like that, and the other person is just not meeting him there. So, and they just want to talk about that superficial level, let's say over here again, which is just killing to the one who's in subjects that interest them from their heart, from their soul, and they're passionate about these ideas, and they're like, wow, man, I really wanted to explain this to you, and because I love to share these ideas with you, but the person can't reciprocate, and so you get into this dynamic where you're like, okay, I'll move on, and I'll try to find other people, which are rare, so you finally usually end up being much more like a recluse. But that doesn't mean you're lonely. You will be more alone, but not lonely, because you got the depth. Because the moment you go into these deeper layers, the amount of satisfaction that you get from understanding or the knowledge that you get from these deeper levels, that is much more sustenance and healthy for someone who's there. Someone like this is much more satisfied being alone looking at this, because this is short-sighted, you could say. And the short-sightedness of being just focused on that is where the masses can hang out, and they're kind of comfortable there. And that's why they can find themselves in these spaces, big groups and parties and clubs, and they all feel like, yeah, we're really doing something, because they're all agreeing at a very superficial level that there's something of value, and there is, in their own world, there is rapport and reciprocity, whatever. They feel like they are in the same thing, and there's something valuable going on, because they're all agreeing on, hey, here we are, we're all dressed in a certain way, we're all partying in a certain way, we're all drinking the same things and eating the same stuff. This is value. We all believe in Christmas, we all believe in New Year's Eve, we all believe in this political party, we all believe in the same religion, and they sit together and they're all like, yes, 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 it feels good, because we feel like we're one. Then these people that go a bit deeper, they get that satisfaction, but there are much fewer than those. But they get a deeper satisfaction from the deeper layers. And then the people that get standing much and much more alone, they see all the way to spirit. So now their sustenance is no longer in the masses. You don't need the validation, so as to speak, of the masses that say, oh yeah, we all agree on a certain thing or not. But we have the people that have that, they would be more like feeding off of these deeper principles, and they're more kept sustained or fed by the spirit itself. And so these people say, well, you're all alone. Nobody really likes those conversations you're always having, and why would anybody want to be with a person like you if you're always talking about this stuff and always busy with that stuff? But that doesn't matter to this individual, because this individual here, he's like fine with the sustenance that he gets from spirit itself. He's more close to, let's say, the source, and the source feeds it, as opposed to this is more quality and this is more quantity, right, in a way. So yeah, I hope that helps, because for years I was wondering why is it that if I describe things, I had so much evidence to prove this stuff. I would take people into meditation, I would do it with them, I would try, they would just not get it, and they couldn't get it, and I was wondering why. But the veils is what keeping them out, and you don't get the free lunch. Nobody gets to see these ideas, so it doesn't even make sense for a person, an individual that's in this position, to be trying to convince the person or explain to this person what's going on in these other deeper layers. They just don't, they're not interested, and even if they were interested, they can't penetrate the veils that they haven't done the work for, to be able to see through those layers to the deeper layers behind it. And so yeah, now you know where your place is on the scale, and why you become more alone but not lonely, and why people don't seem to understand each other. And in many cases, this is the reasons why people go to war, because it's the Babylonic structure. The Tower of Babel really describes in many ways this loss. They fell from let's say God. They fell from their understanding of the deeper states of being, and therefore they could no longer communicate with each other, and the miscommunication led to more chaos. And then in the end, the tower crumbled because people were unable to communicate the same language, the same ideas. They couldn't see the same principles, and they were all misunderstanding each other. And our society right now is definitely in that kind of place, and seems to be accelerating, where people are more in this split, where there's more dichotomy and there's more of a standoff, where people just really get hardened into their belief systems, and the people that try to show and open up get attacked more vehemently, more aggressively. But yeah, that's the main structure. I hope the model helps. So the next time when you're with family and friends and whoever doesn't really want to listen to what you're talking about, you understand why they can't actually meet you in the same place. And it's not even right for them to meet you in the same place, because they haven't done the work to get there either. So, all right, hope to see you in the next video.